This is one of several vehicles off into a ditch after black ice hit the road Wednesday, leaving motorists with no choice but to abandon their car to get home safely. Vehicle after vehicle after vehicle abandoned and stranded along the roads. State police say Wednesday's road conditions made a turn for the worst about 2 p.m. and then
rush hour came around, and that's when we had the problem. They started piling up out here on the Interstate 74 by St. Joe.
District 10 state troopers received at least 140 incidents of vehicles into ditches, stranded motorists, and crashes. The biggest crash was along I-74 near St. Joseph.
And it involved 6 semis, a Champaign County squad car, Champaign County deputy squad car, and also 2 other additional vehicles.
Robertson began pulling vehicles out around 9 a.m. Thursday. He had more than 30 calls he couldn't address Wednesday after Illinois State Police shut down the roads.
Only thing they was going to tow is road hazard only. Accidents in the middle of the road, they had to tow them themselves.
State police say black ice is very dangerous on the roads, and by the time drivers notice it, it's too late.
When we have black ice, motorists think the road appears wet, and so they think it's just, a slush, and they are traveling far too fast for conditions, and they slide right off.
But there are ways to keep that from happening. State police say drivers must take extreme caution.
We don't want you to slam on your brakes and make abrupt lane changes, because that can cause you to have a control loss. You can slide into the ditch.
Now, state police say they expect many more incident reports once these vehicles are removed from several areas. In St. Joseph, I'm Nate Rogers, WICD News Channel 15.
Yeah, that's right. Nate joins us here in the studio with more. Nate, who did you talk to today?
So I spoke to a man who was at that very march almost 50 years ago, and he calls it an absolutely life-changing experience. Now, many of us may have learned about the 1965 march from Selma to Montgomery in school or even through the new film in theaters. But for Charles Morton, who was a teenager at the time of the march, it was all too real. Charles Morton was born and raised in Selma, Alabama. At 17 years old, Morton was among those who marched from Selma to Montgomery. He calls it a life-changing movement for all.
It wasn't about blacks. It was about a whole lot of people, everybody.
Morton says the successful 1965 march was preceded by many failed attempts. The first time they tried to march, Morton says many people were beaten. He suffered 2 broken ribs.
I don't know which one of those cops hit me, but their intent was to run us from that bridge all the way back to George Washington Carver Homes, where we started.
Morton says the walk from Selma to Montgomery is at least 50 miles, and it took the group nearly a week to get there.
We would actually stop and we would stay in the fields, pastures, under tents. People would invite us to their houses to stay. They would feed us.
50 years later, Morton believes Americans have made great strides in voter registration, but it's getting people to the polls, he says, is the big problem.
You shouldn't complain about anything if you don't take the time, a few minutes, and go and vote. You have time to do everything else.
Today, the 69-year-old is a director at Champaign County's Housing Authority. He says overall, the march to Montgomery should encourage all Americans to take advantage of their rights.
Many people have just died and been maimed and injured just for us to have that right to vote.
Now, Morton is also a former administrator of the National Voting Rights Museum in Selma. He won't be attending this year's celebration in Selma, but has gone to previous anniversaries. Morton says the events will be remarkable for all to see. Kim? Champaign's chief of police was in the hot seat tonight after family members of unsolved murder cases came together. The event was hosted by Champaign County's NAACP. It was quite an emotional gathering. More than 50 people attended the meeting, city council members, community activists, and clergy, but mostly family members of loved ones shot and killed months ago, but still no arrests. Chief Anthony Cobb reassured the group the police department is actively working each case. Family members of at least 5 murder victims demanding answers Wednesday after months of no justice.
People who killed my son is out here, and I don't know who they are.
Chief Cobb addressed many concerns, but the biggest complaint was a lack of communication from detectives. Rakeem Vineyard was killed July of 2014. His grandmother says she's heard very little from police.
When I did talk to the person, only the one time, he was really, really rude.
Chief Cobb said his detectives are top-notch and truly passionate about each case, but he agrees the communication must change.
we need to improve our communication with the victims of these horrific crimes. We need to make sure the loved ones know that we haven't forgotten them. We're working the cases.
Mary Smith is among those seeking more answers. Her son, Rashidi Overstreet, was killed this past December. Her experience with detectives didn't go well.
They talked to me like my son was a criminal. They didn't support what I needed.
Smith says her son was well loved, worked at the public library, and fostered 4 children. But again, Chief Cobb assured loved ones that the department is investigating every lead.
We all are on the same team as far as the families and the police. We all want the same outcome, and that's to hold the individuals accountable for the actions that they made that killed their loved ones.
The group also discussed the importance of the public's help in solving these cases, especially from eyewitnesses.
I've heard that from people in the room tonight, that there was concern, there's fear of retaliation and other things, but some things we need to come together in this community and say we're not going to tolerate in our community.
Family members say the hour-long meeting didn't bring closure, but allowed them to vent and receive some clarity.
I guess he understood our cry and that he would be trying to communicate more with the families.
The group also spoke about healing. They wanted to know if there were more community resources available to help them get through the death of their loved one. Chief Cobb said that's another area where the police department will aim to help families. Last month, Champaign County's Department of Planning and Zoning proposed a 5-year plan to address what they call dangerous structures, and the plan is to tear down at least 2 of these buildings every year. One home after the next, in poor condition and deemed dangerous. According to county reports, Rantoul Township had at least 7 dangerous structures, 12 in Urbana Township, and at least 1 in Scott Township.
Anything from a vacant building that is open to intrusion to a building that is literally ready to fall down.
And that's definitely the case at this home in the 1200 block of Northeastern Avenue. One neighbor calls it an absolute shame.
It was like that before we got here, and we've been here about 10 years.
It's obviously damaged. It can't be used. It's an eyesore.
The county first received complaints about the home in 2006. Hull says it may not be torn down until after 2019, unless someone buys it before then.
Everybody we talked to, they said they can't get a hold of the owner, and then I guess the lady that owned it died, and her daughter or son something took it over.
The county says it could take up to 5 years to address dangerous structures like this because of staffing issues within the county, as well as the legal process. It's not a quick fix. Finding the property owner, legal proceedings, then funding demolition are just part of the process.
Folks need to understand that their government bodies only have so many employees and they can only do so many things at one time. But we will work through that list.
Rankin hopes it won't take 5 years to deal with the dangerous home on his block. He says tall weeds and wild animals in and out are among the issues.
And then you got kids running around here and want to get in there and try to tour around in the house, and one day it might fall down on them.
Now, the county is already getting the ball rolling. The 16-unit Jones building near Rantoul, which is on the list of dangerous structures, is slated for a controlled burn next month. Alita?